I'm Matt Schwartz. I'm a professor of physics in FAS. So I'm kind of moderating this, but it's not going to be me speaking in front of you and telling you about small-scale innovations. And we're not going to read through that little booklet that you got, and then everyone's going to go through their own ideas. Instead, the idea is, so there's 5 of us kind of in charge, but not really. And we'll go around and everyone will introduce themselves, and Erin is also going to participate, I guess. Are you staying for the session? Or?
I am here, and I am happy to participate in any way that makes sense. I'll come sit over here.
Yeah, okay, so maybe you could say some words about your ideas about the small-scale innovation. So while you're settling down, I'll just kind of tell you my insights to the idea behind this, which is that, everybody wants to teach better, but we're all very, very busy, and we don't have time to, reinvent a whole course, which, redesigning a course takes a long, long time, and especially if you have a course that you've been teaching a lot, or you know how to do it, you have a particular style, it's very hard to just reinvent that and go from the beginning. So it's very intimidating to try to reorient a course away from things you're comfortable with, so to do active learning or things where you have students just talk to each other and you do some lecturing. I mean, these things are very big changes. But instead, a lot of what we've done in teaching our own ways is see little things that can make a big difference in our courses. And the hope is that by communicating these things that we've all come up with through trial and error and experimentation in our own courses, and communicating them, we don't all have to do that process together. And then maybe if we see these things work, we can help disseminate it to people who aren't here. And I think there's a big problem in education is that there's the people who don't really put an effort into improve teaching. We want to spread it to them, and giving them small-scale innovations, little things they can do to help improve their courses, might help them see that teaching has to change as the students change, stuff that we've all appreciated, but maybe haven't even appreciated that broadly. So the plan for today is, I'll introduce myself, which I'm doing, and then we'll go around and maybe Erin will say some words, and then the other panelists will introduce themselves. And then after that, we're going to break apart into groups and talk about kind of brainstorming about particular small-scale innovations addressing particular questions. So maybe we can come up with some output of this session. And then we'll get back together and kind of report back about what we concluded about those ideas. And then have a kind of larger group discussion about broader term impacts of this program, how we can continue it beyond what we're doing today, and find a way to keep the movement going away from this particular group in future months and years. Continue some repository, go through the web, or so on. We have someone who's going to present a website called ABL Connect, which is started by Justin Tingley, who works with I forgot what the organization is.
VPAL, Vice Provost for Advances in Learning. And Dustin is also a faculty member in the Gov Department.
And I forgot your name too.
Isabel.
And Isabel will kind of describe that as a possible medium for communicating our ideas, but also has similar insights. That's not well known, but is a great resource. So we turn it to Erin.
Thanks you all for being here. When we had these dinners that I referenced before and lunches, there were some common themes, and this one seemed to be often described in metaphors. It's like, give me the genius recipe, give me the little thing the little nudge that I can use, and I can make a little bit of change in my classroom. I don't want to transform everything. I want something little I can do that's going to have a big effect. Matt was the most direct in one of these dinners, I believe it was, and he's been a great colleague in that he came to, I think he's come to a couple conferences. He came to our last conference last year that was small and just focused on assessment, and he was quite critical of what we did and how we did it, and I really actually appreciated that. And he's also been quite willing to say, yeah, I'll take that on. I'll do something here. So when we started talking about how would we have a session on small scale, how do we do it? How do we do it across the institution? He said, well, why don't you send out something, and I'll be happy to send it out, and we'll ask for ideas that come from the community, which we have done, and you've seen that in the little booklet that is in the registration pack. We want that to be a live thing. We want people to continue to think of their small-scale innovations and to contribute them, but that's a challenge. It's a really big challenge here, how to do that. So that is the intro to this session. and how it came to be. And we are hopeful that by the end of it, we will have some clear ideas about what to do next.
Good, thanks, Karen. So let me introduce our other moderators. Different item. Okay, so first we have Rich.
Rich Schwartzstein. I'm a professor at the med school and run the academy there, which is our professional development, education, innovation part of the med school.
Okay, do you want to say something about it?
Yeah, so I would, just to build on what's been described earlier, one of the mantras I have at the med school for faculty is what I call the power of the pilot. You know, you think you want to do something, and another faculty knows that that'll never work, and you get back and forth. In the end, you have to do the experiment. And so you do a little thing, and you do a little pilot of it, and you actually see what happens. And that's been a really guiding force that allows us to get past some of that resistance. And I think as we talk today, one of the things we probably should try to emphasize, what do you feel are the barriers to you trying something new in your class or course, and then we kind of brainstorm together about how we get past some of those barriers.
Okay. Now we have Lucie from the law school.
Hi, I'm Lucie, and I'm from the law school, Lucie White, and I teach a course on social welfare law, and one of the things that I do is have students in small groups teach workshops that are actually full class sessions that have to be interactive themselves. And we go through a process of their framing the topic, and then eventually performing and reflecting. The most difficult piece, because it's a risk that the other students will be sitting in there and learning from their peers, is how to coach the design of the sessions so they won't be a waste of time for their students. And I've thought a lot about different approaches to that scaffolding, and that's my current issue.
Andrew?
I'm Andrew Warren. I'm an associate professor in the English department, where I'm also the director of the undergraduate program right now. I contributed a teaching innovation called Sharks and Rats, which is a discussion idea that grew out of a course kind of out of necessity. I teach a book called Infinite Jest, which is 577,000 words long, and I didn't want to give 10 lectures on that book, so I split the lectures up into discussion sessions. And it grew out of a way of trying to get students comfortable. You can read about it in the booklet. But it's a small scale thing that started kind of out of necessity that's actually transformed the whole course. It's a way to get students to kind of have their own reading of the text, but also see how other people read that text. So I'll probably describe it in my own little group in a little bit, but that's what I contributed. And I think this is such a great idea. I think these little innovations can really, really change whole courses.
And finally, Chris.
Hi, I'm Chris Robichaud. I teach ethics at the Harvard Kennedy School. And the innovations that I do include inserting small simulations into classes for students to wrestle with really difficult problems. I grew tired of students always adopting heroic opinions about how they would behave in ethics cases. And so I decided to give them scenarios in which they had to make hard decisions and deal with the consequences. I incorporated a lot of tabletop game design, so there's dice rolling and so forth in my simulations as well. The world doesn't always cooperate with people's intentions. And there's been a lot of good experiences that have come out of that. I think the last thing I'll say here altogether is we often hear about simulations and think about them as these epic things. You can design epic simulations, build a whole course around it. What I'm really trying to do is show that you can design much smaller simulations that can work in a class, or you can even put it into a review section and then debrief it in class. These don't need to be massive. They can be small and quite manageable and still fun and really engaging for students.
Okay, great. So now, following this, and I'm sure a lot of you have ideas that you want to share with the group, and I hope we can have a kind of a forum for this based on organizing smaller discussions about particular questions, then we'll come back and present these things to the larger group. So what I'd like to do now is split into small groups. It looks like, well, we have a lot of tables that seem to be full. if we have 50 people here, split it.
Like put more chairs up to
We
the
can put
table.
more chairs. It might be better to have fewer groups, like, maybe 10 people per group. We can do 5 groups of 10 people. So before you stand up and move around, let's kind of coordinate it based on questions that you think you might have insights to. Some might be particular. I mean, you see, we have people from medical school, Kennedy School, law school, FAS, and some problems are particular to certain types of classes and some to others, and your own particular insight might help provide insights as to those classes.
So are we gravitating to a table with one of the facilitators around what they just spoke about?
Not what they just spoke about, what they're about to speak about. Which I'll introduce in a second. So for my group, I'd like to work to addressing a problem that I find, professionally troublesome in science classes. I teach physics, which is getting the students to do any kind of reading ahead of time. They come in and they expect you to teach them everything, and you spend a lot of time teaching them the stuff that they could have easily learned on their own, and then you take the whole class doing that. At the end of the class, you have 1 minute to explain the really hard thing. And it works so much better if at home they go and they read, they take a first pass through the material, and then they come in and you know exactly what they're stuck on, and then you figure out a way to spend the session or have group discussion about the hard parts of the class, not the easy parts. However, what's really hard is to get them to actually do the reading and tell you what they're confused about ahead of time. And I don't have a good solution for that problem. So I'd like to see if anybody can help maybe brainstorm about how we can get students to really do the reading and know that they did it, and then help get feedback about what they've done before the class session, so we can have more efficient use of class times. I'll sit at this table, I guess, and people who are interested in helping me solve this problem. Now I'll turn it back to Rich.
So I would like, there are a lot of submissions in the booklet about how to get people to think and reason more deeply. It's a particular interest of mine. I've done some things in that area too, so we'll try to focus our discussion around little innovations that might encourage critical thinking and reasoning.
This may be unique for the law school, but I have a number of students who come in thinking they already know virtually everything.
Speak up.
Okay, I teach at the law school, and maybe a unique issue. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. But I come in with students done very well in undergrad. Now I got into Harvard Law School, and they think they already know anything under the sun that I could possibly teach them. And my dilemma is to get them into a mindset that they can interactively and critically learn without necessarily having to use a very often to some students counterproductive, top-down, cold calling kind of paper chase.
So I'm Andrew again. I at my table would like to talk about something similar to what Matt's going to talk about, which is how students can learn how to pinpoint their confusions. I teach typically pretty difficult texts, either small poems or large books or works of philosophy, and students either are just afraid of those difficult things, or they kind of get through it, but they're not sure what they're confused about. They have trouble saying what they don't understand, and also saying, I think, what they do understand. So I'd like to talk through that problem.
We started a conversation here that I really liked, and it's an extension of active learning simulations, which I'd like to continue to talk about as well, which is learning through failure. Right? So how can we get students to have enough courage to actually experiment with things and fail, where they're going to do a lot more learning by failing than they are by succeeding. I think that this is a big challenge with a lot of our students here, is they're just used to success, success, success. Obviously, that's what got them here. But that's not where a lot of good learning happens. You don't learn how to play a video game the best way by succeeding. You learn how to play it by failing a lot. This is my world. That's how I feel. But it's true. So I thought that was a great conversation to continue, and we can do that in the context of continuing to talk about ways to bring active learning into the subjects that interest you. And so we'll talk about that here, and anyone wants to join, we'll put some tables together.
Do you want to have a table, or do you want to participate in a group?
I'll join.
Okay. Okay, so we have 5 topics. We have very ahead of time. Rich wanted to talk about critical thinking.
Yep.
Lucie's interested in know-it-all students, getting them to take a step down. Confusion. And confused already.
Yeah.
And Chris is interested in getting students to fail and be happy about it.
To learn from it.
Our conversation has been great, and I think we have some good ideas to share with the group, but I think we should just go around table by table and share what we found and see how it goes from there. And we have a half hour left, so let's do this maybe 15 minutes, well, see how long it takes. And then we'll take a few minutes to go over some of the future looking aspects of it. Maybe we'll start in the back. With 92.
Okay, so our topic was confusion and difficulty in figuring out how to pinpoint students' confusions, how to create a space where they feel safe to be confused. And we came to some conclusions. One is that you need to reinforce continually that confusion is okay and even necessary for learning, right? That you're not actually learning something maybe if you're not confused by it. Nietzsche famously said that he was glad that he didn't understand everything right away, because if he did, then he wouldn't have, had to work through those problems. So also, the second thing is professors need to acknowledge that they have a curse of knowledge, and then they can use a lot of different techniques to get out of that, right? Often you don't understand your students' confusions because you've been through those confusions and you now understand it. And so one suggestion was you can use doctoral students as kind of an intermediary. That's one way to do it. Perhaps what we talked about most was getting at confusion indirectly, right? So your goal is to get students to say, I'm confused about this, I don't understand this basic thing, but you can use different techniques to say, well, I don't understand this little thing, and then that can grow into the bigger thing. One great example of this was using case studies, and this is from the business school, where you don't have to declare your own confusion. You can project it onto the person in the case, the protagonist in the case. Another way to do it is to project it onto maybe an intractable problem, like we're talking about, the nature of the political or something. You could project your confusion onto the confusion that's inherent in the problem. I'll end with a couple questions we wanted to ask. One is, why are we interested in creating a safe space? Why do students need to feel safe? Why is there so much interest in that? And we have some answers, but I'll throw that out there. And the second is, how can you best get students to learn from each other's confusions, right? Often students can learn from each other a lot better than they can learn from us, because they're at a closer level to each other. So those are 2 questions we ended on. I don't know, did I leave anything out or say something?
I'd say only the point about assessment.
Yeah.
As really a great signal of whether you're, as an instructor, honoring confusion, the way that you assess, and then the additional point about a classic small-scale innovation is a 1-minute anonymous what confused you and how illuminating that can be.
Okay, thanks. We'll go over there to Chris's table.
So we're talking about failure and learning through experiential learning. One thing that we just wanted to distinguish is finding a way. We didn't reach any conclusions, of course. But we failed. Yeah. One of the things, though, that came up towards the end of the conversation, I think it's really important to acknowledge is it's one thing we want students to learn from failing, but it's absurd to ask them to enjoy it at the same time. And so it's reasonable to not like failing. And so thinking of strategies, we're trying to think of strategies in which you can hold those 2 things together. You can create situations in which there's likely going to be some failure in the activity that you're running through, something to learn from, something something to use, but you also acknowledge the feelings that students will be having from that experience. The other, another thing is, this is not failure for the sake of failure. It's not, doesn't that, there you go, you failed. All right, now next, right? You always want there to be some diagnostic behind the failure. Some way to say, well, look, this didn't work. Now let's use that as an opportunity to step back and ask why it didn't work. That's where the learning is actually going to happen. So if you do want to incorporate failure through experiential learning or whatever in the classroom, you want to not just have it be about failure, but you want to have it be about the learning that can come from that. And so you should have some kind of a diagnostic involved in doing it. The last thing that I'll mention, and I'll open it up to all of you, is we recognize that different disciplines are going to approach this a little bit differently, and of course, obviously. But one thing that seems to be shared throughout is that this is experiential learning and learning through failure is a lot about process. It's about how you're arriving at your conclusions rather than the conclusions themselves. The failure, in other words, need to be that you didn't land here rather than here in a specific answer, but rather maybe something going wrong with the process in which you arrived at whatever answer it was that you arrived at. And I think that that's going to lead to a more rich way of using experiences and failure in the classroom. Does anyone else want to speak to anything? Did I cover stuff okay?
I would just expand a little bit on that to say that one thing that stands out for me is the idea that it sort of raises the question of how do you assess? And do you assess the ultimate outcome? And this is just a sort of expansion of what you're saying. Or do you try to find ways to assess what the process looks like and sort of check that along the way?
Great. Maybe the center table.
Lucky to have a group that...
You have to speak up.
Yeah. Lucky to have a group that includes both people who teach students and also people who teach faculty in one way or another to experiment with different kinds of interventions, possibly in the face of difficulty. And so we're talking really at two levels, just with respect to how to particular issue of working with students who come in thinking they already know everything, which is a common in our discussions. One idea very resonant with what you all are talking about is to start with some kind of mini challenge, small innovation, simulation, question that enables everybody, possibly getting in the shoes of another fictional person, whatever, to acknowledge that they could use more sophisticated tools to address the problem. That's particularly true in law and policy and reading literature. And then there's receptivity for those more sophisticated tools to be made available without rejection. We also talked about the fact that if you are in a wider learning environment in which students are physically to safe spaces, and if you're in a wider learning environment in which students are shamed in some teaching methods, in part as a teaching methodology, and students can come into other settings and displace their aggression. And that is something that both of us in school and law school really put. So that's something we're thinking about when we unpack the commitment to safe spaces in learning. We also talked about the importance of people who are confronting, or teachers who are confronting know-it-all students to feel safe enough to collaborate or to just dialogue with their colleagues about different strategies. We talked about many opportunities for students to work with peers in order to have the opportunity to facilitate discussion or to teach one another, to encourage them to, whatever kind of dynamic they're having with authority figures, to break that apart. And we also talked about opportunities for, in office hours or whatever, to dialogue with students who are feeling like they have to to make them more aware of different kinds of interventions that could open discussion rather than close them off. And that's a more risky endeavor, but if you can enable students to become more reflective on the modes in which they're engaging with the larger class, sometimes they take it as a challenge to try to shift how they're
Okay, now let's hear from Richard.
So we were trying to grapple with this notion, how do we teach thinking skills? And we started out by trying to get a sense of what we believed that meant, what thinking and reasoning meant. And we came up with a few themes of being able to look at a topic from different vantage points, using different frameworks or approaches. And someone needed to get past preconceived notions, core beliefs that they might have, and see the inconsistencies in their thinking, something we might group under metacognition, or the self-awareness. And getting students to get past just picking the right answer. That's a big part of this. So then how do we begin teaching this? And I think most of the conversation focused on the kinds of questions that we ask students. So instead of the sort of what questions, really focus more on how and why. Looking at things that you observe. Why are you seeing that? What are you seeing? How are you applying that? How can you justify that answer? Where are the data that you're pulling in? Getting them to elaborate on that. How do you back up an argument? All important. Another key area was having students formulate questions. Are their questions all fact-based, or are they able to give you a more insightful question about the material that they're trying to deal with, which is really an important part, particularly as you think about after they've left your classroom and go on and continue to learn, are they able to formulate those sorts of questions that represent a deeper look at the material? And if they start to give an answer that may be right or wrong, but even particularly if it's wrong, rather than just correct it, say, tell me more about that. Tell me more about how you're thinking about that. And sometimes we'll find that students recognize the error in their own thinking as they have to go on and explain it in of course, the best outcome that you can get. And the other thing that we talked about was this notion of cognitive dissonance. Are they holding two ideas which in fact are contradictory? And they don't even recognize that, and being able to get them to see that on their own, again, rather than have you just tell them, because they recognize after some probing that these two things are incompatible, and then get them to be more self-aware about that. The last item that we didn't really come to consensus about is, while you're doing this, do you call out the thinking skills that you're trying to teach them? So I think for the most part, faculty don't do that. And we've done a little bit of work at the med school where students, if you ask them have they been taught how to think, will say no. It's not the perception, even though you may be doing some of these strategies. So there may be some advantage to actually, in the moment when you're doing this, and say, why did I ask you that question? Or what did you learn from the fact that we went through this little exercise? Really make it explicit that you're teaching them how to think as well as
So the last is our session. I'm not going to summarize it, but one of my colleagues here,
sorry that we're not really prepared. Our thing is not being prepared yet. What we concluded is that responsibility of learning alone does not motivate students sufficiently to come to class prepared. And so we will look at different strategies that could be employed to get students to do the work ahead of time. I have some things that came up from the talk, but I hope other people, I was taking notes on some things and other people were taking notes, so if I missed things, please throw them in. Ideas to do pre-quizzes for the students to do before coming to class to make sure that they've done readings or understood key points, and to submit misunderstood questions that they have about the readings or places that they're not clear, so that those can be addressed in the lectures. Team-based learning, peer work, cooperative work, and that peer pressure is highly motivating for students. Making the preparation high stakes, so making it count more either with the response papers counting for their part of the grade, or the quizzes that they take ahead of time, or what they are asked to do in class that requires that pre-work to count as more of the grade is motivating. For a Monday, Wednesday, Friday class, there was a nice suggestion of starting new material on Wednesday, which would then allow for a longer time for the students to engage in the readings, with the final lecture on the Monday of the following week, by which time hopefully the students have done all of the reading and are really able to answer any last questions that they have on it. Response papers, one thing that you would do the night before. Have students vary the kinds of things you're asking the students to do in the classroom, like having students take a side on the material, so that forces them to analyze the material from a particular vantage point so that they could argue against other students in class. So instead of just the goal of understanding the reading in class, to take a position to be motivated. Make that preparation an expectation for the course, for the grade. We make it explicit that you want them to do it, and then reference the reading if it's reading that you want them to do in your lecture. Don't make your lecture about something entirely different if you're giving them this reading assignment. And if you can't find suitable reading for material, ask students to get meta with it and pinpoint the shortcomings of the reading. In other words, make the students have them take charge of their own learning, just to the limits of the material, prepare them, and ask them to figure out what they should do next. And then annotations, or different types of assignments that you can give them ahead of time if they might be more motivated.
I'll just add one thing. I think one thing that's important, well, actually I can add. So ultimately you'd like students to do the work you assign them out of love for the material, right? You cannot expect them to walk into a class with that motivation. So it can be very important to just set good habits early and structure the incentives for them so that they have a powerful reason to do the thing that's in fact good for them, even if the reason you initially present them is not, that it's intrinsically good for you for some other reason. But the basic incentive structure, I think, is there's some intellectual work you're going to ask them to do that you're going to assess them on, such that if they do this reading ahead of time and come into class with questions, etc., they will be in a much better position, and they know they will be in a much better position to do the thing you're going to assess them on. Whether that's take a test, conduct a debate in a section, write a paper, whatever. But there's an explicit tie between the work you're asking them to do ahead of time and their ability to succeed in the task that you're going to ultimately grade them. So one way or another, you need that kind of incentive structure. And this can be mixed in creative ways with the other kind of incentive that we've noted, which is having them work together in such a way that they're accountable to each other in small groups. So, imagine saying to a group, this would be better for humanities class, here's some questions for your small group. Go and discuss them ahead of time. Bring any confusions you have to class, where we'll discuss them. And then the day after, I will randomly select one of you to write up a response within a narrow window of time. So that would be a powerful motivator. I think if you design a class where you build these kinds of incentives in from the beginning and you make it clear why you're doing so, then hopefully by halfway through the class you won't need them anymore. The students will actually have seen, thanks to doing this kind of work and developing these kinds of habits, I'm actually having a good time in this course. I'm actually learning stuff, and I feel proud of what I've done.
I think we've taken it. That was a good summary.
Okay, great. So we have about 10 minutes left. So first of all, I'll thank everyone for their participation in this discussion so far. It's been really great. And I think what we're seeing is, if you ask these questions and you brainstorm about it, you can come up with answers. And I think part of the problem is that people aren't always asking the questions about what's wrong with my course, how can I get it better, and you kind of just go ahead. Right? So even having some way that people know there are questions you can ask, do I even ask if my students are preparing things ahead of time? Have I even considered that I want to enforce that? Right? Do I want to develop critical critical thinking? Do I want them to know that failure is an option? Right? Do I want them to see this cognitive dissonance? Do I want them to be aware of these things? And as an instructor, you need to be, know what the problems are you're trying to solve in your course. And then, if you have a great group of great faculty around you, you can brainstorm about coming up with ideas. But unfortunately, neither of these things really happen on a regular basis. So what we'd like to do is find a way that you can shortcut some of these steps. Instead of having to wonder what's wrong with your course, maybe somewhere on a website, a list of questions that you might say, wait a minute, I have that problem in my course. And then you click on it, and here's some answers that people have submitted. Right? And I think this would be ideal. What I'd like to have in the last 10 minutes is a discussion of possible ways to keep this going and communication can maybe produce a resource that faculty can use and build on, right? So that we can all contribute additional ideas and have a conversation that's broader than what we can do in a setting once a year. So maybe to start this, we'll have Isabel describe a website that the Vice Provost for Research and Teaching
Yeah, I'll just say this came out of a HILT grant early on, and Dustin has continued to add to ABL Connect. It is a great resource. It now is housed, I believe, in the Bach Center, and it is something that could be related to the small scale booklet that we have.
Hi, so I'm Isabel Busa, and I just joined ABL Connect as a research assistant 2 weeks ago. And I'm really excited to present this. So ABL Connect is an active learning database. Active learning is something that we're all pretty familiar with, but just to reiterate, it's really going beyond the traditional lecture style of teaching and having some kind of engaging activity. So we have an activity database that I'd like to show you. So if this website, as soon as you click on the activity database, you can search by activity type, you can search by discipline, so we have a number of humanities, social science, you can search by learning goals. Some of these activities span from 5 minutes, quick sort of exercises to a semester-long type of simulation, which is really interesting. The students hope is also one of the ways that you can search. So that's just one of the really cool resources that you can find on the website. The other thing that we have is on the video tab, we have a set of tutorials. And these tutorials have some step-by-step instructions that could be used in complement with some of the resources that you can find in the activity database. I think one of the professors is here. Teaching prize winner last year. So we also celebrate really good active learning techniques, and every semester we have a teaching prize where we award the best sort of active learning techniques.
I just ask you to clarify a question. Is the video of the professor talking about what they do, or is it a classroom example in practice?
Sorry, that was confusing. So there's, in this video section, there's some interviews that we have, and then there's also tutorials, which is separate. And if you kind of just stand over to here, you can look at, so there's interviews and there's tutorials.
Is class visits watching it in action?
Yeah, but we haven't, okay, so the class visits has not been.
That's the idea though, huh?
That's the idea, to kind of see in action.
That's why she was hired.
Yes, exactly. And this partner section is also to show that it's not just the Harvard schools. That we also partner with Cornell, Yale, MIT, and Mass Bay to have this different learning styles from all these institutions. And finally, I just wanted to,
So how do things get posted?
so for people like me, I, as a research assistant, I would connect with, with you and ask you a list of questions that would then turn into a one-page sort of activity write-up that then gets uploaded to the website. The other way that we sort of curate the website is through the activity prize survey. So the teaching prize, we do it in semesters, and so we get a number of teachers to send in some of their activity write-ups, and through that survey, we work on some of the documents that are then posted on the website. So this last page is the additional resources page that has some other active learning ideas that are not in Harvard or our partners, but outside. So like we have Wentworth Institute of Technology. Someone mentioned polling and clickers on our table, which is a really exciting way to engage students during the class. And yeah, this is one of the resources. If you have any questions, I can answer. I can kind of answer. Again, 2 weeks in, but I'm happy to answer or direct you to the right person.
So I think this is a really great resource. I guess it's just because we were at the failure table, but I've looked through this website and a lot of it is really great sort of suggestions for things I could try. I'm wondering if there's some analogous place where if I'm struggling or I'm not sure what to do or I have some problem, I can post that and get some feedback. Not posting that like, here's how I spectacularly failed, but rather like, here are things that I'm kind of struggling with. Can we get more feedback from other people, especially people who are in the database and stuff?
Can I just add that when Dustin has wondered whether small scale and activity ABL Connect should become one thing, my one concern is having talked with a lot of instructors who are a little allergic to the idea of calling what they're doing active learning. And so a little bit related, how do you open the tent big enough for people who might not consider themselves those who want to engage in active learning technologies or active learning sorts of things?
Can I just, so the way we distinguish active learning to activity-based learning is active learning is really anything that's outside the traditional lecture style. We're not saying that lectures are not engaging or they can't be active, but if there's something that you're doing in the classroom that's, beyond the teacher, instructor delivering information to students, then we will include that under the umbrella of active learning. So it's just to share that it's very inclusive of all styles.
So we're pretty much out of time. I mean, I do want to have some feedback about how we can continue this more broadly. So let's thank Isabel for her presentation. And I'm sure Dustin would love to have feedback about it and suggestions for the digital website. But more broadly, let's just maybe have a couple of minutes if people have suggestions about how we can continue this discussion going forward.
So speaking to that, whether it lands in the ABL Connect or not, I'm not sure, but I could see it potentially landing there, the set of questions that you've helped us to be aware of today and speak to, and the additional kinds of questions that people might come up with. So I think, Teddy, you're wanting let me put a question out there and get help, which we could also potentially build in somewhere, but there could also be, these are common questions or questions that are present for us, and someone could then connect that to what pieces in the ABL Connect speak to that. I don't know whether we want to make it one and the same, but But I know that the Carnegie Mellon Eberly Center for Teaching, a big part of their website is driven by questions about teaching and resources that speak to
So we can have like a simple question and answer form, like on Amazon, when you have a question about a product, you just write a question and someone answers it. And make that maybe even just live and interactive rather than moderated, or maybe post-moderated, something like that. That's maybe one way.
a little thing where there's live kind of input, but also someone's also looking at what do we already have that
Right.
is an answer to that.
And someone kind of
Linking it
collates it
database.
afterwards, yeah.
I was just gonna, I think it's along the same lines. I think we met years ago. I attended an event once in the Science Center that consisted of John Kenneth Galbraith, Robert Coles, and somebody else who was like ultra distinguished. And the title was How I Failed as a Teacher. And it was packed. So it just makes me think, it's sort of along the lines of what are the questions instructors would own up to having, even to themselves, and sort of along the lines of like, you don't really want to click on that, but you're going to want to. And so what would be good clickbait, in a sense, for instructors? And then you get to put up what, they want to hear. And it could be people's failures.
Things I did wrong in my class, you won't believe them, or
Right? Yeah. And it's a brainstorming conversation. It would be fun to do that. Yeah.
Could we have some way of summarizing the excellent suggestions that you made here?
Right, but that's the question. Where do we summarize it? How do we, we can write it, we can send an email, and
I don't want to lose that.
We want something a little bit more permanent, and that's kind of.
Yeah, I will work on summarizing this in one way or another, and we'll keep working on how to make the best resource for it.
Yeah, this is very modest. If we heard something today and we tried it ourselves, could we just send back to the center our experience of it? And that might be some way to keep aspects of the student forward.
If you registered, you will get a follow-up note from me or someone on the Hill team. If you didn't register and you want to get a follow-up note, send me a note.
Right, and we're generally people who want to be involved in seeing how this goes forward. Send an email to Aaron or me, and we'll form a group of really dedicated people who want to continue to discuss things beyond the session, because we're out of time.
Just really quick, I think the power of something like this relies on the champions, as we say, mentors versus champions, and who and how are these resources going to get pushed out to, especially the professional schools that might not have different pedagogies or different mindsets and stuff. Who can be the champions of collecting that knowledge? Who can serve as that connective force? You and probably me. But hey,
a bunch of us have been trying to figure this problem out.
And how do you connect the points that people are already connecting?
Who heard of ABL Connect before, say, 2 weeks ago? Did you?
No, yeah.
One answer to this question that you haven't made articulate is there is this organization called the Teaching and Learning Consortium, or TLC, which has representation, typically not faculty, but staff and technologists and other kinds of very able people that are actually tasked with trying to figure this out. And our colleagues are leading this charge right now.
And that group, the TLC, is thinking of themselves as nodes in a network, and really trying to actively understand how to be functional nodes in a network and get information moving both ways.
Just with respect to the professional schools, I think that there's also an opportunity to bring into the discussion innovations that are taking place within the professional schools. With instructors in how many exciting innovations that we offer.
Yes.
600 all over most of the professional schools involved to cross that needs to be.
Okay, people are trickling out. Let's thank everyone for